Hey friends, I'm Michael Patton, and I have got a special teaching session for you. It's going to be really exciting, talking about Christian worldview. If you're coming to us through Spotify or just through voice capture device of some sort, a podcast, you really want to check this out in video. I'm going to post this to my blog. It'll be on YouTube, also my Patreon page. Thank you all my patrons who support us. You're the reason why we're able to do this, but you really want to see this. It's a very difficult concept I'm going to be dealing with. And it's not difficult, let me tell you something. It's not difficult in the sense of you not being smart enough for it. It's difficult in the sense that the idea and the concepts behind it, which are necessary, and I'll explain that in a moment, are mind-blowing. They're paradoxical. You just can't really work it out in your mind. You're not going to be able to work out a lot of this stuff in your mind, but you'll understand what I'm talking about. And this is about just basic Christian worldview. Here's the chart that you may have seen before, Christian worldview chart. And as you can see, it's it's busy. It's a busy chart. But I love this chart. I love it so much. On my website at Credo Courses, you can buy cups and blankets with this on it, just to get conversations started, or just a big poster with it on it. But this is a Christian worldview chart, and it basically explains how everything is set up in the Christian worldview. Above the line, everything right now, and then below the line, everything in the new earth, how it's going to look. You'll understand as we go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it one step at a time, go through this chart in four sections. I'm doing the best I can right here with the program, and hopefully it's gonna work. I'm switching around here, and I'm gonna build it one step at a time. So let me go to the place I'm looking for, teaching, and then let's bring this up. Okay. And you guys, a lot of you guys have asked me to explain this, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Now think of it this way. Here we go. We're starting with the Christian worldview. Christian worldview, and I'm building it one step at a time, and this is everything right now. Notice here on the legend, on the side, it says, cannot be crossed, can be crossed. Now right now the only thing we have is a solid line, which means you cannot cross it from one side to the other. So on top you have transcendence, and on bottom you have immanence. Now I want to deal with this word transcendence here. That is such an important word, such an important concept. I mean, I guess along with transcendence you might be able to put holiness. I got great handwriting, so this is going to be fun. But holiness is one way to look at this. Otherness. Holy means to be set apart, to be different. God is different in the way he is, in his morals and his thoughts, and really in his actions. He is perfect morally. He is set apart from us morally. Whenever you and I become a Christian, we are identified with Christ, who is holy. And so he is set apart. And so some ways we are set apart. And this is just set apart in our morals, in our standing before God. We are other. But this is talking about from the standpoint of ontology. Now I'm sorry, I'm not going to throw these things out there too often. But please understand the word ontology. All of you who are Christians, you're watching this, pause right now, write this word down, because it's so important. It's a basic word in philosophy. Ontology is simply the study of stuff. The study of stuff. Now let me tell you what I mean. It is the study of what stuff actually is, the substance of things. So when we're talking about ontology, we're trying to, if you ask the question, what is a chair? You would say, well, a chair is ontologically speaking, what the stuff really is. It's made up, this chair that I'm sitting in is made up of wood and of leather and of cushion. So you've got an ontology to the chair. Whenever you say, what is the ontology of the street outside? It is made up of concrete. And you say, what's the ontology of concrete? Well, concrete is, and you go through and talk about the stuff that makes concrete, the gravel and everything else, the rocks. However concrete is made, which I don't know, but it has an ontology. Everything has an ontology. The universe, or the earth, has an ontology of dirt and lava and so on and so forth. The sky has an ontology made up of different elements or different types of air. Space has an ontology. Whenever you got the black matter or the dark matter, and then you have the stars, which all have their own. Just understand, ontology is what something actually is. What is the stuff of something? So whenever we're talking about transcendence, you can't really talk about the ontology of it in a way that you would want to talk about it and want to understand it. Because transcendence means that its ontology, its stuff, is other than what we know. Now, park that for a moment, and let's go down below the arch, which cannot be crossed, and look at immanence. Immanence is closeness, things as they are with us, close to us. So they're the stuff that we can actually, in our world, as humans, perceive, see, study their ontology, the stuff of it, because it's in our universe. So once again, you have all the ontology of the universe being below the arch, and then the ontology of that which is above the arch is transcendent. Now, notice here, you have another distinction. You have time everlasting, and then you have timeless eternity. Now, time everlasting is different than timeless eternity, at least in the way I'm presenting it here. Time everlasting is time begins at some point and it goes on to the future forever. That is a possibility. Now, whenever you talk about timeless eternity, that is completely different. It is transcendent. It is above what we know of time. It is above even the concept of time. It is timeless. There is no time above the arch in the transcendence. The stuff of transcendence does not have a relationship to time. It does not experience a before and an after. Time itself, I know maybe blowing your mind, but just stick with me. You've thought about this before, and I'm just going to try to place the Christian worldview where it actually belongs. But timelessness, you do not have a before and after. You do not have, it's an eternal now. And so events don't happen like they happen here. We talking about time and the definition of time, and I think the best definition of time is simply this: the measurement of movement, because you've got time always measuring some type of movement. There's no stuff of time. Time you can't boil down and say, here's the stuff. It's kind of like there's no stuff of numbers. You can't boil it down and say this is its ontology. Doesn't mean it's not real, but it does mean you can't find stuff for it. It's in relation to other things. Whenever you count things, you're relating it to other things. So you have timeless eternity, and time-bound, everlasting. Now this is, like I said, this is everything right now. So pause right there and try to wrap your mind around that a slight bit, and we'll keep on moving, and I'm going to move to the next step. Now the next step is here, where you have a few things added. Okay, notice here, below the arch, the immanence, you have the earth, the moon, the sun, the universe. Basically, what we're trying to say is that everything in our universe, and even if it's a multiverse, you have everything that is below the arch is that which came into being. Everything above the arch did not come into being. Everything below the arch had a time where time began, or it had a introduction where time began, and ever since then we have experienced a succession of movement, a measurement of movement. We have experienced time. Time, space, and matter belong below the arch. Time, space, and matter. Those are corollaries. You can't have one without the other. Once you have one, you have all three. Time, space, and matter is so incredibly important to understanding our immanence of the ontology, the stuff in which we exist in below the arch. So here we have the earth, you have all the created universe, and time, space, matter. Oh, I already had that right there. And then above it, you have timelessness, spacelessness, matterless. Notice right here, look at that. Everything above the arch doesn't have any relation to that. There was never a time whenever that which is above the arch came into being. Now, notice here, I've got God's ontological essence above the arch. God's ontological essence. If you were to say, what's the stuff of God? That's a big question. What is the stuff of God? We've talked about the stuff of concrete. We've talked about the stuff of chairs, the stuff of human skin, bone, everything that makes up who we are, all the elements. What are the elements? What make up God? Well, there aren't things that make up God. You say, wait a minute, Michael, that doesn't make any sense. There are not things whenever you're talking about it in relation to how we understand it. God is timeless. He doesn't experience a succession of moments. God is spaceless. He does not exist in and find extension in space. There's no arm span to God. There's no height to God. There's no traveling from one part of, say, where God exists to another, because that would introduce time. That would introduce space. That would introduce space, and necessarily that would introduce matter. God is matterless. God does not have eyes, he does not have a head, he does not have an arm, he does not have a hand, even though many times in the Bible it speaks in what's called anthropomorphic language. Language about God that helps us to understand the activity of God from the standpoint of how we experience the same activity in our immanence. So you have the eyes of God move to and fro throughout the earth, looking for somebody whose heart is continually devoted to him. He doesn't really have eyes. That's important to see. He doesn't have eyes because he does not have matter. He does not have time, and he does not have space. Now you say, Michael, how do you know this? Where does it say in the Bible all these crazy things you're talking about? Well, I'll put it this way, and I'll give you this. It doesn't say it in the Bible. It doesn't say it directly in the Bible, but it does say it indirectly. In Romans chapter 1, it says, since the creation of the world, not since the creation of the Bible, this is since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, his eternal power and nature have been clearly seen. How? Being understood through what has been made. Now, where do you get this? Well, if we understand what has been made, if we understand, like I sit here and you sit there, you know you didn't create yourself. I know I didn't create myself. I know I'm a contingent being, which means I had to have things that happened beforehand, and parents, and they had to have parents all the way back. I am a contingent being. I exist in this time, space, matter continuum, breathing air and living total dependence. God doesn't. God is outside of time. He does not have any dependence. There was no before God. God is the beginning of everything below the ark. So whenever he created the world, he created basically the ark and all below it. But beforehand, what was it? Well, beforehand, we can't say anything about what it was. We can just say what it wasn't, because we speak always in relation to how we understand things in its immanence. Okay, so this is called apophatic theology, theology of negation. Cataphatic theology is theology of revelation, but apophatic theology basically says what is by saying what isn't. So God is immaterial. God is he is, oh gosh, I can't even think. The word that means he doesn't change. Oh gosh, I can't even think of it. But yeah, there's a word that says he doesn't change. That is a theology of negation. It doesn't say what he is. It just says what he isn't. Whatever he is, he doesn't change. That'll pop to my mind in just a moment. But so you got the Trinity, God in his essence. You can't. That's why when we talk about the Trinity, we say it's one God in essence, in ontology. His stuff is one. You can't divide it because that would introduce time, space, or matter. You can't divide those things that don't have time, space, or matter. You cannot divide God in his stuff, in his essence, in his ontology, but he is three in person. So you got the members of the Trinity existing in an eternal relationship, all sharing the exact same nature. What is that nature? That nature is that which is above the arch. That which does not have reference to time, space, or matter. God created everything. He wasn't existing in time, twiddling his thumbs, getting bored, saying, I wonder what we should do. It's been boring lately because we've just about done everything, having existed forever. That is not God. God created time as a certain event. I almost said at a certain time, but it doesn't work. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God created time, space, and matter. What existed before it? God in the eternal now. Now, I'm not saying God hasn't created other arcs, like angelic beings, or maybe hundreds and thousands of other creations that fit underneath an arc like this. That's not what I'm saying. So I don't know that you can't even say that there was ever a time whenever God didn't have these things, because you don't have God existing in time. You would have to have a before and after. So God exists in his complete fullness at all times, with all times assumed within him. Let's put it this way. One of the hardest things for us, I sit sometimes and I get nostalgic, and I get depressed about things that have passed, because I wish things were the way they were at some point. You may remember when you were a little kid and you felt comfortable with your parents, or you may remember at high school, or whatever years were the best. You think back of that, and your memory begins to fade. You're not experiencing it anymore. We experience the present moment. That's the only thing we can experience. I can't experience anything but right now. I can't even experience 2 minutes ago in actuality. Yes, it's vivid in my memory, so it is with me, but it'll fade. It'll fade and fade. Finally, it's gone. Many, many things will be gone. I can only experience things that are within my vicinity. I don't experience things on the other side of the world. I don't experience things on the other side of the universe. I am very, very limited, contingent, dependent upon time, space, and matter. God is not that way. There's no failing with him. He experiences all things all at once in an eternal now. Now, once again, if your head goes, and you can't get it, that's true. You can't. If you come to me and say, Michael, I finally understand, and here's how it works. No. You probably don't get it then. Because this creates confusion, because God is so far above us, so distant in his essence, although close as well, we'll talk about that, but so far above us that it is mind-blowing. We cannot go to the place where God is at, either in our minds or literally. We'll never get above the arch. That's why Paul says to Timothy that we worship a God whom no eye has seen nor can see. We cannot peak above the ark. You cannot one day say, hey, God, I really, really want to go up there and exist in the ontology, the place where your ontology exists. Now, let me tell you two problems with it. Let's say you got up here, and here's you. Okay, here's a little stick figure. Here's you up here with God. Now, the moment you get up there with God, this introduces space, because you are in a different space than God. You are not with God. This introduces matter, because now there are two of you. You have one, two. And then all of a sudden you have time, because it is a measurement of movement. So once you go above the ark, you have just discounted that was really God. You would basically be saying, this is not really God right here, because we would have to draw an arc over him in order to explain where he came from. You see, if we're here with him, you have to say, hey, where did both of us come from, since we're existing in a time, space, and matter? We exist in our immanence, with a little thing called the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect is not just a neat thing that we talk about, it is an actual law. Every effect has a sufficient cause. I'm an effect, therefore something caused me. The universe is an effect, therefore something caused it. So everything below the arc in the immanence is an effect. And it has to only have one thing that caused it. And that thing that caused it has to be outside of it, has to be transcendent to it. This is what St. Anselm, this is why he called God the necessary being. If you keep on drawing these things and you keep on, let's say you have many gods up here, well, they're not really many gods. You just have many really powerful beings, maybe. And you say, who created them? And you say, well, these couple of people up here created them. Every time you introduce more than one, in essence, then you have another arc drawn over that. And you have to explain where that came from, because in time, space, and matter, there is always a cause and effect relationship. So basically, what you have to do is you have to get to the point where there's only one arc with one above it, oneness above it. So this is God above the arc. Another word we talk about when we're talking about transcendence is simplicity. Immutable. That's what I was trying to talk about earlier. God is not, we explained that God is immutable. He does not change. You know what mutability is? Change. Well, whatever that is, God is not. We can't explain what it means to be one without change, but that's who God is. God is simple. This is called the simplicity of God. Now, simplicity of God doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean it's just simple. In some ways it does, but in another real way it doesn't. Simplicity is simply being not composed of parts. Parts in matter, even parts in time. It's just a complete oneness at all times. Whatever that is above the arc, whatever it is, it has to be simple. It is not dependent upon anything, and it exists everything that it is in its completeness, in its ontology at all times. You cannot divide it. That's why sometimes I say, well, you can't take the Trinity and divide it into three pieces of a pie, 1, 2, 3. Because the moment you do that, you have the pie, the actual stuff of the pie, divided. God's stuff is not divided. He is one at all time. He has to be. Otherwise, you have to draw another arc above him and figure out who the necessary being is. Aristotle called this the unmoved mover. Another great term for it, but I really like necessary being, because necessary being describes what we're talking about here. If something exists, this is the basic argument, and it's a simple argument, and it's a profound argument, and it's solid, and nobody can ever overcome this. If something exists, then a necessary being exists. You will eventually get to that one being who does not bow to the law of cause and effect, because he is not in time. So you cannot say who or what created God. If you say, if God created us, then who or what created God? You're missing the point. God is that which is above the arch. He is that final one who does not fall into the category of the law of cause and effect. And the only reason he doesn't is because he's simple, he's timeless, he's matterless, he's spaceless. He does not have a relationship to the world the way we do in his essence, in his ontology. So that's what we got here. Now let's move on down. We got the Trinity up there. Now you say, if God exists up there, how in the world do we interact with God? Well, God does have a presence. Now notice here, this is still everything the way it is right now, and I've changed it a lot. Let me take it one step at a time to show you what has been added. You have now the dotted line. Now, this is going to blow your mind. You're going to love this. This is so much fun. You have the dotted line. Beforehand, it's a solid line. You cannot cross it. God's essence cannot come below the ark. If it came below the ark, there was a before whenever it wasn't below the ark. There is no before and after with God's essence. God's essence exists all at once, everything that it is. But that doesn't mean God cannot be with us in a very, very real sense. You've got God's presence now, his personal presence being below the ark. And you've got the angels, you've got Christ coming to the earth, you've got so you've got the persons of the Trinity coming in a real presence, a real personal presence below the ark. Doesn't mean their stuff is below the ark. Doesn't mean everything that God actually is, his ontology, somehow transferred to below the ark. Because again, if it transferred, then you would say before it wasn't and after it is. Then it was never timeless. Once timeless, always timeless. That's a basic rule. If you're not timeless, you can never be timeless. That's a basic rule. Because if you were not timeless like you and I, and we decided to become timeless, then that would mean we were always timeless. You can't, do you see what I'm saying? There's no before and after, so there's no succession of movements. And you cannot have something before and after. So God, in his essence, always is what it is, but his personal presence is below the ark. Now look here. You've got the dotted line separating now our universe, the entirety of our universe, and then what we might call, and I'm careful with this, but I'm going to call heaven the place where God resides. Eventually, whenever the resurrection happens, heaven will come down to earth, according to Revelation chapter 22. So you got heaven on earth, and you got this dotted line no longer existing. At least I think. I mean, I guess there's a scenario in which it could exist. That's maybe a different dimension where the angels reside. Not sure. But I think this dotted line will be removed eventually. So you have God's personal presence, his throne, and the Shekinah glory of his throne. The Holy Spirit represented here by a dove. The Son as the incarnate Christ. All coming down in a real personal presence below the ark, even though their essence is still above the ark. You've got them separated from us with the dotted line. So everything above the dotted line and below the solid line is heaven, in the sense of maybe the third heaven that Paul talks about. You got the first heaven being the sky, the second heaven being the universe, and then the third heaven being where the presence of God is, or the throne of God. So notice here, you got, who all is up here in heaven? We have the angels, although you can see, though it can also be below the ark, down here, close to the earth. You have the Trinity, all persons represented, not their essence, but their personal presence. And then you have us, if we have died. When we die, we go to be with Christ. Our spirits go to be with Christ. So we can get above the dotted line. And of course, demons as well, or, just different created beings exist above the ark. But they also exist below the ark as well. So notice here, am I missing something? Isn't this exciting? This is so much fun. Let's move on to the next part. Let's go right here, and let's fill this thing out. Now, this is the complete final of the way things are right now. So you go here, and you look, what has changed? Well, nothing's really changed, because I'm not trying to change anything yet. I just want you to see a few things that stand out. Here's God below the ark. I'm going to zoom in on this. And if you can read that, I think you can. Notice here you got God's name below the ark. It is Lord. And I'm just using this as a representative. I think you'll understand why in just a moment. God's name above the ark. Yahweh. Remember whenever in Exodus chapter 6, Moses didn't want to, or chapter 3, didn't want to go into the promised land and made an excuse, and he said, how are people going to know who you are? That sent me. And that's whenever God said, tell him I am sent you. So tell him Yahweh sent you. In the Greek, this is in the present participle, the being one, the one who just is. That is a perfect description of what we're talking about whenever we talk about God above the ark. It's the best one I could come up with. the one who just is, the necessary being, the unmoved mover. But I think Yahweh is actually the best philosophical way to put it. So here we are back at Romans chapter 1. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Nobody has an excuse for not understanding that God is something other. He has to be. And his relationship to things has to be something other. So you got God's name, and then you got can we see him? No, we can't see him. How in the world can you see God who is above the ark? This is from 1 Timothy, who alone is immortal and lives in an unapproachable light, whom no one has seen nor can see. It's not that he's up there saying, listen, I don't want anybody to see me. I'm too cool. I'm too powerful. You cannot see him any more than you can make a square circle. It is a contradiction. The moment you see him is the moment you have to draw an arc above him, and he is no longer God, and you have to find a creator for him. Then what are some of his attributes? You talk about the attributes of God. What are the ones that are reserved for him being above the ark? What does God have to be in order to fit the definition of God? It's not just real powerful. It's not just somebody who's worshipped. It's not somebody that just is loving. He doesn't have to be that. He has to be powerful, ultimately powerful. We shouldn't put that one in there. But he has to be these things out of necessity, or he doesn't fit the definition of the one who is above the ark. And that is simple. He has to be not composed of parts. Aseity. That means of himself, non-contingent, not dependent upon anything, never had anything come before him to make him who he is. He does not depend upon anything. He is who he is at all times in its fullness. We do not complete him. Our love does not make him better than he was before. He is perfect at all times, completely holy at all times, unchanging at all times. He's omnipresent. He's omnipotent. Ontological immutability. That's the word I was trying to find earlier. Ontological. In his essence, it doesn't change. I'm going to change that in just a minute, because we'll see there's a sense in which God is immutable, but in his essence, he does not change. And he's sovereign, completely sovereign. Now, when we go over here, we got his self-description. Remember beforehand, it was Yahweh, tell him I am, the being one sent you. Well, another time he comes to Moses in Exodus chapter 34 and kind of does another reintroduction. This is a more personal reintroduction. This is the introduction of God below the ark, as if God is saying, let me tell you something more about myself, that I'm not only just a being one, but listen to these attributes. He says, I am the Lord, compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Those are some attributes that he wants you to know about that are relative to who we are, relative to who we are. We can understand those. We can't understand him being the being one. We can just bow in our humble understanding that he is beyond our understanding. He is what is called ineffable. Ineffable. I know it sounds bad, but it's a great word. He is ineffable, which means, basically it means he blows your mind. You cannot conclude who he is or how he is. It is too great for us to understand. Ineffable. So there is a sense in which God is that. So can we see him? Yes. Below the ark, we can see him. In Matthew 28:20, it says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age, or end of the world. That's what Christ says. Christ is God. So we will be able to see Christ. I think even in heaven or in the new earth, we'll have the throne of God come down, and there's some sense in which we will be able to see the Father and the Holy Spirit. Doesn't mean we're seeing their essence, actually seeing the stuff of God, but we are seeing their personal presence, in a very real sense. Communicable attributes, those attributes now that exist below the ark, that are not necessary for God to be God. And it's great that he is, because he is loving, gracious, forgiving, truthful, righteous, and also changes in the sense of relents from if he's intending to go and destroy Nineveh, and Nineveh changes their mind, he relents. And whenever he's creating the earth in Genesis chapter 6, I am sorry that I've created man on the earth, he has a real emotional reaction to it. So there is, whenever God is below the ark, he is truly experiencing in his person the things which he created in us. Now, it doesn't mean God changes his mind in the sense of whenever he decides to do something that maybe he'll go back on it. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying that helps you to understand many times in the Bible where it says God does not change, and then it says he changed his mind. We're talking about ontological immutability compared to personal mutability. So you have all these attributes of God: love, grace, forgiveness, truth, righteousness. God didn't have to be those things. You understand that? You see, we go back over here, and this is what is necessary for God to be God. These things right here. Without those things, God would not fit the definition of God as we're talking about him right now, the creator of all things. The creator of all things has to be this. But the creator of all things, listen to this, he doesn't necessarily have to be this. I mean, there could be a creator out there that hates us, that is not gracious and not forgiving, that does not tell the truth. That is not a necessary part of what his being is. It's a necessary part of what our God is, because once you ascribe these attributes to God, they are forever his attributes, because they find their genesis in him above the ark. They find their genesis in him right here. That doesn't change. So therefore, if he's gracious, every bit of him is gracious. You cannot divide graciousness. Remember, he's simple. You cannot divide him into parts. You cannot divide graciousness into parts. You cannot divide his attributes into parts. So it's not like there's a part of him that is love and a part of him that is righteous and a part of him that has justice. All of these things exist in him, and he is completely every single one of them. So we divide them because we're trying to understand him, but he is what he is. Every bit of these exist in him and fill his character completely, and always have. So therefore, we've got a God who is both of these things. And I'm glad he's revealed to us that he is loving. Again, he didn't have to be, but now that he's told us he is loving, we know that it's true, and we know that that can never change. So these are just some wonderful, incredible ideas and understanding about God and who he is. So here we are with the way things are. Now I'm going to try to jump over to the way things will be. And hopefully this will not require me to break it down as much as that last one. So this is everything in heaven and earth. This is going to be everything the way it will be in the future. Sorry, I got to find the right one. Let's try this one. Okay. Everything in the new heaven and the new earth. Check this out. Now, what's different? Just look at it for a moment and see what's different. I'm going to go back up to the old one. There it is. You got the dotted line. You've got, notice where God's at in his personal presence in heaven. Notice what heaven is. Notice demons and everything else. Now, what happens? By the way, I'm taking away these two markers of definition of who God is, just not because he changes, but because they marry, and we've already explained that. But let me focus on the differences here. Notice there's no more dotted line. Heaven becomes part of it. Listen to this. Revelation chapter 21 says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. Basically, that's saying heaven is now on earth. And as you can see here, the new earth You don't need the separation in the personal presence of God. You do not need heaven the way we have it right now. Heaven becomes earth. There is no such thing in the future, I don't believe, as a heaven. Now, hell gets introduced at this point. And I know a lot of you say, wait a minute, hell gets introduced at this point. Doesn't hell exist right now? I don't believe so. I don't have time to explain it right now, but I don't believe hell exists for people until the judgment day. Yes, there's holding places for demons and stuff like that, and we're not really sure where people who are without Christ, have not been covered by Christ, do not love Christ, do not know Christ, go when they die. They could just stay on the earth in some type of ghost-like form. They could go to a waiting place, but I don't think, I think I can make a strong enough argument to say that I'm 80% sure, and 80% is a lot for me, 80% sure that hell does not exist right now. Hell gets introduced after judgment. Now you have a separate compartment here, still under the ark, because of course, nothing but God can exist above the ark. And the new heavens and the new earth. And I have basically the same things here, because I don't think when we look at the universe, there's going to be much change. I know people say, wait a minute, there's no more sun. I think that's symbolic of something else. I don't think that means there won't be any light that comes from the outside. I think it's trying to communicate something. I could be wrong about that. I'm well open to being wrong, but there'll certainly be the rest of the universe. That did not come as a result of the fall. The fall did not happen, and God said, wait a minute, okay, now that the fall has happened, we have to have the sun. God is restoring what he originally intended. And this is the final restoration of what he originally intended. God redeems the earth. God redeems people. He is in the process of what's called the apokatastasis. The apokatastasis is the restoration of all things. Peter says heaven must receive Christ until the restoration of all things. This is all the things that the Bible has said, but it's also back to his original intent. Think of it this way. Whenever God created the heavens and the earth, and it said, it is good. Said it many times, it is good, it is good. Created the stars, it is good. Created the water, it is good. Separated the land, it is good. Whenever he created man, he said it's very good. At the very end of everything, it was all very good. It was a big creation process. It was part of his plan. He had a very detailed plan. I mean, you can't even imagine all that went into it. All came at once from God, because everything always comes at once for God. But it is just mind-blowing what we discover within this plan. Now, he did all of this stuff, and we fell. Adam took the apple and ate it, and all of man fell with him. He didn't say, oh my gosh, all right, what are we going to do now? I had this big plan called Plan A, and I was going to do all these things and show them all kinds of stuff, and there was all this universe that I had created, and they were going to subdue the earth and discover, I mean, they have relationship, on and on and on he goes. And he said, you know what, now that they have, after 5 minutes, fallen, let's go with Plan B, to where there's no more any, it doesn't even relate to what it was before. Now let's go to the new earth, and let's make it to where there's no more gravity and no such thing as gravity that holds people down. Let's make it to where people can fly and do whatever they want. Let's make it to where there's no more stars, that kind of thing. That is not what's going on. God is in the process of restoring exactly what he originally intended, and that's what this is meant to represent, the restoration of all things. And so now, of course, you have hell that is added to this, but it's still some people like Marcus Bart thinks that hell itself will even be restored to Christ and redeemed in him. I don't think so. I think hell is an eternal place. That is a bad place, that people who do not want to be with God, people who hate God, the doors of hell are locked from the inside. All these people hate God, and their door is locked. I'm trying to draw a door, and it's not working out very well. But that comes into being. But God is restoring everything which he originally intended. That is the entirety of this chart. See if I can get a view of the whole thing here. There we go. That's what it looks like. So it separates the top, everything right now, and then at the bottom, everything the way it will be in the future. A basic Christian discipleship understanding of the world, but yet a mind-blowing one that you could think about for days and days and days and days and never really get it. But that's the point. God is He is ineffable. He is above our understanding. And but we can put it all into place. And I don't believe this is not just something that's a theory. I'm not just spitballing here with my theology and saying, what if it all is this? This is something that's well established, so much so in Romans chapter 1, we understand that this type of philosophy has already been given since the creation of the world. Those of you who look at me and say, Michael, you have not given me the Bible. I've given you a few Bible verses, but I want to hear this from the Bible. Remember, here's from the Bible. Romans chapter 1, I'm going to say it again. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, everything we're talking about here, his above the arcness, his invisible attributes have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. If something exists, then something exists above the arc. We cannot go above the arc logically any more than we can make a square circle. We are without excuse. Romans chapter 1. Because of this type of we need to understand this. The Bible assumes we already know this. It doesn't go through and try to tell us all of these things and draw out a map like I have here, because philosophy, reason, the world and creation have already told us this. The second book of God has already told us, and really the first book of God, because this comes before even the Bible, this understanding, this worldview. So hopefully this has been helpful for you and didn't make it worse. I explained every part of this chart. Again, you can get a blanket with this chart on it at Credo Courses, or a cup, or a t-shirt, lots of things. At Credo Courses, go look in the apparel section. But I hope you enjoyed this, and it explained a little bit more. Maybe there'll be questions that come up. I know that I talked to Tad about this in the last podcast and conversations with Tad, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to say this and put this one out there, because I want him to watch it, and I want him to come to me next, and what are going to be the next questions you have, because this is a basic understanding of the Christian worldview, but it is mind-blowing and it is hard. So, for those of you out there, please check out my Patreon page. Patreon is how I get paid. It's how I support myself. You're investing. I'm basically a theological missionary. I've got all kinds of things I do in theology. You probably already know about a lot of them, but check it all out. Also, if you're a part of the Patreon page, you get so much free stuff. It is well worth it for the $3 Patreon, or the $9 and the $25, or even the $100 Patreon. I would love to have you as a patron. We're going to start having more events. As a matter of fact, I tried to get this on Patreon beforehand, but I still haven't figured out how to do the virtual camera with the program I'm using on Discord, because we get free access to our own place on Discord that connects all the patrons. I just haven't been able to enact it as well as I need to yet to start having live events. But we're going to be doing this, and I planned on having a book study, but I couldn't figure out how to do all this. But we will, book studies, theology studies. I'm going to be going through the entire theology program with the patrons, updating the theology program. So those of you who have gone through the theology program, you've already seen this chart in a different way, comparing it to other worldviews, which is incredibly fun. I mean, I would love to do. Maybe I'll follow up next, assuming that you already know this, and talk about how other worldviews look, because it's totally enlightening. But again, please become a patron, help us out, support my mission. This is all I do, is theological teaching. We will see you next time. Thank you.